Hi everyone, I'm Clack. I mentor at Brighton Coder Dojo, a code club for 6 to 17-year-olds. I also run a software product company in Brighton. And I have a question. Why learn Racket? Why teach it somewhere like Coder Dojo? I've been thinking about this question for a while, and here's where I've got to. Perhaps you can help me. So at Coder Dojo, our aim is to inspire and develop great programmers that have a deep understanding of how code works, programmers that can create amazing things on their computers. At code clubs, young people typically start with a block-based programming language such as Scratch. If you've not seen it before, this is what it looks like. We have an actor and we have blocks that we can run to make our actor do things. We can snap blocks together, and we've also got loops. And it's pretty sophisticated. It's a nice environment for creating programs. However, kids outgrow it and they're ready to move on to text-based programming language, which is usually Python. But why not something else? So I think Python is a great language, but it seems to me that kids are missing out by not exploring more broadly, and maybe Racket is actually a better place to start. So how can we make this case for Racket? Well, let's compare Racket and Python from the point of view as someone learning a text-based language for the first time. Let's have a look at a game tutorial I wrote for Candy Crush in Python and one I'm working on now in Racket and see how they compare. So this is the Python tutorial, and we've split it into a number of parts and it guides you through creating the game. So before we get to the tutorials, let's take a quick look at the REPL. It's great that both languages have a REPL. So here we've got the Mu editor, which is a nice environment for people starting out in Python, and then the Racket environment. So let's just try a few things. So we can do things like this. And we can join strings. Nothing too surprising there. We can make a list. And we can do things like shuffle a list in Python. So this is interesting. So far in the REPL, everything we've typed has given us some immediate feedback and shown us what we've done. But this random shuffle function actually changes the list itself. And this is a bit confusing for people new to programming to understand when you get something returned and when something is modified. So let's have a look and see what happens in Racket. So just some simple commands here. There's also some nice commands to generate lists. And we can do things like this. And the nice thing here is everything in Racket is very consistent. It returns something when you execute it. So REPLs are great. You can see a slight difference between how Python tends to work in terms of not always returning something, sometimes modifying something, and the consistency of these functions in Racket. Okay, so let's have a look at the Candy Crush tutorial and start out in Python. So with Python and Pygame 0, it's really nice. You can create a games world with not much code. So here we've got 3 lines. We can press play and we can see the empty games window. We can then add a tile to this by creating a draw method and use screen.blit to draw an image. And you can see we've got a single image there. We can create more images. Just use some different color ones, updated positions. Now this obviously isn't going to work for our game, so we can use a loop instead. So here's a version I prepared earlier. We can change those tiles to add some randomness to it, just by putting that in here. Now we have some random tiles. So this works pretty well, but kids aren't really sure why this works. It tends to be they copy it from the tutorial and paste it into their code. And also something interesting happens when we add the cursor. So let's do that now. Now we need to remember to draw the cursor, so we can do that here. And let's just test that that works. Okay, so now we have a games cursor, but look what happens when we put in the code for moving it. Now I'm actually not going to add the moving code, I'm just going to add an empty function, but this will get called each time we press a key. So this is really confusing. We can see that we've got tiles, that they're random, but each time we press a key, the tiles completely change, and that's because we don't have any game state in our program. And so the next step in the tutorial turns this simple statement to draw tiles, and we create a data structure and then use that to draw the tiles. And this is very confusing. There's lots of new things for kids to learn: lists, loops, and indexing. So let's see how this tutorial works in Racket. In the tutorial, we use the REPL a fair bit to try out ideas before writing code in our program. So let's have a look at that now. Now this is a basic version of the program that generates an empty world, and you'll see that there's more code here than in the Python version. So the nice thing about doing this in the REPL is we can run all sorts of different functions and see results. Here we can get a tile, and we can change the number and get a different one. So let's write a function now to do that for us. So we can take this line of code and put it into a function over here. Now we're not using the number at the moment, we just want to see if this function works. So let's just run that, pick up that code change, and now we can try using the function. So it doesn't really matter what the number is, we get the same tile back. And we can fix that now with the format function. And in fact, we can try that first in the REPL to see how it works. So we can see that that number makes its way into the string, and we can then paste that into our function to replace this string here. And obviously we want to use number rather than 3. So let's try that again. Let's go back to the candy command, where we have number 4 and number 1. So our world is going to be a list of candy. So we just generate a simple list like this. And then the next question is, how do we turn that list into a list of numbers into a list of tiles? And this is where we can introduce the map function. And it's quite straightforward. We can simply use map, candy to bitmap, and then we can use our list. And that is a really nice feature of Racket. We can see the results of that directly in the REPL, and we can obviously add more tiles and do other such things. So we can do so much in the REPL to try out ideas before writing code, and this is a nice way for people to learn about functions and see their results before copying them across into the main program. So let's look ahead to a later version of our game and see what pretty cool things we can do in the REPL. This version draws a grid of candy and has the cursor which you can move around. So if we stop that, we can see the kind of things that we can do. So here we can actually draw the world in the REPL and pass in different lists and different cursor positions to see what happens. This is really nice for testing. For example, we can try out the function that moves the cursor and see how that works. So this will see if the cursor's at 5, 5 and we move it, if we move the x by -1, what result do we get? We get 4, 5. This kind of stuff is really nice if you want to use test-driven development. We can use other functions to generate longer lists of tiles. Let's use make list. I'll paste this in. Now we have a world with all the same tile, and we can also do cool things to combine different lists of tiles to generate interesting patterns. Like so. So what's good about Racket? Well, there are several things I think make it a great language to learn to program in. Firstly, consistency. Everything looks like this, a function with some parameters. Functions just convert some input thing into an output thing, and they're easy to understand because there are no side effects. And as you've seen, functions can return images which appear in the REPL. Also, you can test as you go. You can run almost any part of your program in the REPL because most functions are pure, so you don't need to set up any state. So in my mind, this is the #1 reason to learn Racket. You've got a much better chance of understanding how code works by working on little functions that do simple things that you can test for yourself in the REPL. But you do need to know the Racket or the scheme way and of course you need a Racket tutor. So thank you for watching. I hope this has got you thinking, why learn and why teach Racket, and I would love to hear what you think. I will publish these tutorials soon on Read the Docs, and it's on GitHub already. My ID is just my name in lowercase, Eric Clack. Thank you.